On a spring morning in Manhattan, a 72-year-old black woman named Maddie Parker stepped into one of NYC's most exclusive new cafes, seeking a moment's warmth from the streets. When the owner's cold stare and venomous words turned her simple rest stop into a public spectacle of cruelty and prejudice, she found herself humiliated before a crowd of indifferent patrons. But among the sea of averted gazes and uncomfortable silence, someone of immense influence had witnessed the entire ordeal unfold. What happened next would shake the foundations of the establishment, catch the attention of millions around the world, and change her life forever. The crisp air nipped at Maddie Parker's cheeks as she made her way down the bustling New York City sidewalk. At 72 years old, the woman had seen her fair share of spring days in the city, but this one felt particularly biting. The sky hung low and grey, heavy with the promise of rain, while a steady breeze carried drifting pollen through the air. Maddie tugged her light jacket closer around her slender frame, its thin layer barely enough to ward off the unexpected chill. Beneath it, her old turtleneck sweater offered little additional warmth to the breeze that seeped between the pores of her clothes. Her arthritis flared with each step, turning the uneven pavement into a careful challenge. A quick glance at her watch revealed the time: 12:45 p.m. The ever-present reminder of her medication schedule lingered in her thoughts, a routine she had long since accepted as part of her daily life. As she rounded a corner, a new storefront caught her eye. The ground floor of a sleek glass-fronted office tower now boasted an elegant cafe. Elaborate floral arrangements framed the entrance, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the muted tones of the city street. Ribbons and banners proclaimed grand opening congratulations from various companies and families. Maddie paused, considering. The pollen was beginning to irritate her eyes and throat, and the thought of a warm refuge from the chilly air was appealing. She checked her watch again. 12:50 p.m. There was still time before her crucial 1 p.m. medication, and she could take it with a soothing cup of hot water. With a small nod to herself, Maddie pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped into the cafe. The interior was a study in modern minimalism. All clean lines, polished surfaces, and muted earth tones. The scent of freshly ground coffee and baked goods wafted through the air, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Maddie's eyes scanned the room, taking in the mix of patrons. Most seemed to be professionals from the surrounding office buildings, dressed in crisp suits and tapping away at laptops. A few tables hosted what appeared to be business meetings, voices kept low as they leaned in over steaming cups. She made her way to a round booth table near the back, settling into the plush leather seat with a small sigh of relief. As she shrugged off her jacket, Maddie's mind turned to her usual careful considerations. Her Addison's disease required a delicate balance, strict timing for medications, careful monitoring of hydration and salt intake. Even a simple cafe order needed to be weighed against potential impacts on her condition. A young waitress approached, notepad in hand and a bright smile on her face. "Welcome to Whitaker's. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Maddie returned the smile warmly. "Yes, dear. I'd like a cup of hot water, please. And perhaps something light and sweet. Do you have any fruit tarts?" The waitress nodded. "We have a lovely selection of mini tarts. Lemon, raspberry, or mixed. Which would you prefer?" "The mixed berry sounds perfect," Maddie replied. As the waitress turned to leave, Maddie called out softly, "Oh, and could I trouble you for an extra warm towel?" "Of course, ma'am. I'll be right back with your order." As the waitress walked away, Maddie reached into her purse and pulled out a small pill bottle. She set it on the table, along with a compact mirror and a tube of lipstick. The routine was so ingrained, she hardly had to think about it. Check her appearance, touch up her makeup if needed, then take her medication with a sip of water. It was a small ritual that helped her feel in control, a moment of normalcy in the face of a chronic condition that often left her feeling at the mercy of her own body. Maddie glanced at her watch once more. 12:58 p.m., right on schedule. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling a sense of accomplishment at navigating another day successfully. Little victories, she reminded herself, were still victories. The cafe's atmosphere washed over her, and Maddie found herself relaxing into the booth. Perhaps this new place would become a regular stop for her, a pleasant change of scenery from her usual haunts. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the soft music and gentle hum of conversation soothe her. Maddie's eyes snapped open at the sound of a throat being cleared pointedly. She looked up, expecting to see the waitress returning with her order. Instead, she found herself face to face with a man whose expression could only be described as openly hostile. He was tall and lean with sharp features. His crisp white shirt and dark tie marked him as part of the staff, but nothing was welcoming about his demeanor. "Can I help you?" Maddie asked, her voice calm despite the sudden tension she felt. The man's lip curled in a sneer. "I think the question is, what do you think you're doing here, ma'am?" His voice dripped with disdain. Maddie blinked, taken aback by the blatant hostility. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'm just here to have a quick snack and some water. My server mentioned earlier that you requested an extra warm towel," the man said, his gaze sweeping over her from head to toe with a subtle sneer. "I'm sorry, but we don't accommodate special requests." Maddie nodded understandingly. "Okay, no problem, sir. I'll just have the pastry and the hot water then." The man barked out a harsh laugh. "Pastry? In those clothes? With that skin color? I don't think so, Grandma. This isn't some charity kitchen. Excuse me, sir. I can pay for those pastries." Maddie felt as if she'd been slapped. She straightened in her seat, drawing on years of facing prejudice with dignity. "Sir, I'd like to speak to the manager, please." The man's sneer widened into a cruel smile. He tapped the name tag on his chest. "James Whittaker, manager and owner, at your service." The last words were spoken with such sarcasm that they felt like another verbal slap. Maddie took a deep breath, fighting to keep her composure. "Mr. Whittaker, I don't know what's prompted this behavior, but I assure you I'm a paying customer, just like anyone else here." Whittaker leaned in, his voice low and menacing. "Listen here. Your kind brings bad luck. You'll scare away our real customers, the professional and rich people making business deals. This isn't some dive bar or greasy spoon. We cater to a certain clientele, and you're not it." Maddie's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Mr. Whittaker, I understand this is your establishment, but I have as much right to be here as anyone else. I'm simply here to take my medication and have a small snack. There's no need for this unpleasantness." Whittaker's eyes narrowed. "Medication? What, are you some kind of junkie too? That's all we need." "No, sir," Maddie replied, her patience wearing thin, but her tone remaining measured. "I have a medical condition called Addison's disease. It requires strict timing for my medication. I just need to take my pills and have some water, then I'll be on my way." Whittaker waved his hand dismissively. "Save your excuses. I don't care if you've got 3 heads under that tacky sweater. You're not welcome here. There's an older cafe establishment downtown where your kind usually goes. I suggest you take your condition there." Maddie felt a mix of anger and hurt rising in her chest. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the young waitress appeared, carefully balancing a tray with Maddie's order. Time seemed to slow as Maddie watched Whittaker turn towards the approaching waitress. His movements were deliberate, calculated. In one fluid motion, he intercepted the tray, his fingers curling around its edges. "Sir, what are you?" the waitress began, but her words were cut short as Whittaker pivoted sharply. With a flick of his wrists, the contents of the tray went flying. The cup of hot water arced through the air, its contents spreading in a scalding fan. The small plate holding the berry tart followed, spinning like a discus. Maddie barely had time to raise her hands in a futile attempt at protection. The hot water struck first, splashing across her arms and face. Pain bloomed instantly, angry red splotches appearing on her skin. The tart followed, smearing across her pink sweater and leaving a trail of purple-red filling. A cry of pain and shock escaped Maddie's lips. The cafe fell silent, all eyes turning to the scene unfolding in the corner booth. Whittaker's face contorted in a mockery of concern. "Oh my, how clumsy of me." His voice dripped with false sincerity. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Your appearance must have made me lose my focus." Maddie's arms throbbed, the pain intensifying with each passing second. "Please," she managed to gasp out. "I need a medical kit, some ice at least." Whittaker's fake concern morphed back into a sneer, hushed but clear in Maddie's ear. "A medical kit for a little spill. Don't be so dramatic, old woman. If you need to clean up, use the restroom." The young waitress stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. "Mr. Whittaker, shouldn't we get back to work?" Whittaker snapped at her. "And bring a mop. Our valued customers shouldn't have to look at this mess." Maddie's hands shook as she reached for her purse, desperate to salvage what she could. As she moved, she noticed her pill bottle. The water had partially drenched it, seeping inside. Her heart sank as she realized the expensive medication was likely ruined. Fighting back tears of pain and humiliation, Maddie clutched the damaged pill bottle and struggled to her feet. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her, making each step feel like a monumental effort. She could feel the eyes of the other patrons on her as she made her way towards the restroom, leaving a trail of water droplets in her wake. As the bathroom door swung shut behind her, Maddie allowed herself a moment to lean against it, her breath coming in shaky gasps. The encounter had lasted only minutes, but it felt as if hours had passed. She looked down at her arms and cheeks, wincing at the angry red marks left by the hot water. Her once neat pink sweater was now a mess of water stains and smeared berry filling. But it was the pill bottle clutched in her trembling hand that truly made her heart sink. Those small white tablets represented more than just medication. They were her lifeline, carefully budgeted for and religiously taken. Now, because of one man's cruelty, that lifeline was in jeopardy. Maddie straightened up, squaring her shoulders despite the pain. She had faced discrimination and hardship before. She would face this too, with all the dignity and strength she could muster. But first, she needed to assess the damage and figure out her next move. With a deep breath, Maddie turned to face the bathroom mirror. Maddie's reflection stared back at her from the spotless bathroom mirror, a stark contrast to how she felt inside. Her usually neat appearance was in disarray, but it was the look in her eyes that truly caught her attention. There was fear there, mixed with the determination she'd cultivated over decades of facing adversity. Maddie gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady herself as a wave of vertigo washed over her. Her eyes darted to her watch. 1 p.m. A jolt of panic shot through her. She was now 20 minutes past her critical medication window, a dangerous delay for someone with Addison's disease. The strict timing wasn't just a matter of routine, it was a matter of life and death. "Stay calm," Maddie whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "You've gotten through worse. Just think it through." With shaking hands, she examined the pill bottle. The label was smeared, and the paper started to peel away from the plastic. When she opened it, the acrid smell of dissolved medication hit her nostrils. Most of the pills had either partially or completely disintegrated, forming a pasty mess at the bottom of the bottle. Maddie's mind raced, calculating the cost of replacing the ruined medication. These weren't simple over-the-counter pills. They were specialized, expensive, and crucial to her survival. The money she'd carefully set aside each month for her prescriptions now seemed wasted in an instant. Another wave of dizziness hit her stronger this time. Maddie gripped the sink tighter, her knuckles turning white. She knew the signs all too well. Without her medication, her body was starting to react. Low blood pressure, fatigue, and, if left unchecked, the potential for a full Addisonian crisis. The weight of her wet clothes suddenly felt oppressive. Her pink sweater, a favorite she'd owned for years, clung uncomfortably to her skin. Dark patches spread across the fabric, a mix of water and berry stains. She dabbed at them futilely with a paper towel, but only succeeded in spreading the stains further. Time was running out. Maddie knew she needed to act, to get some form of her medication into her system before things got worse. With trembling fingers, she sifted through the mess in the pill bottle, searching for any tablets that might still be usable. Finally, she found one. Slightly damp, but still mostly intact. It wasn't ideal, but it was all she had. Maddie stared at the small white pill in her palm, a lifeline reduced to this single dose. She brought it to her lips, trying to swallow it dry. Her throat constricted, and she began to cough and choke. In desperation, Maddie bent over the sink, turning on the tap and cupping water directly into her mouth to wash down the pill. As she straightened up, water dripping from her chin, Maddie caught her reflection again. Tears welled up in her eyes at the indignity of it all. She, who had always prided herself on her independence and dignity, reduced to this. Taking a deep breath, Maddie did her best to compose herself. She smoothed her hair, straightened her sweater as best she could, and gathered her resolve. It was time to face the hostile environment outside once more. As she opened the bathroom door, the aggressive air conditioning hit her damp clothes like a physical blow, and Maddie shivered, wrapping her arms around herself as she stepped back into the cafe proper. The chills seemed to seep into her bones, a fitting metaphor for the cold reception she'd received in this place. As Maddie emerged from the restroom, a low rumble of thunder reverberated through the cafe. She paused in the doorway, watching as gusts of wind rattled the large windows at the front of the establishment. The weather, it seemed, had taken a turn for the worse, mirroring the turbulent atmosphere inside. For a moment, Maddie considered making a dash for it. Braving the elements seemed preferable to remaining in this hostile environment, but another clap of thunder, louder this time, made her reconsider. In her current state, weakened and still reeling from the assault, venturing out into a spring storm could be dangerous. With a resigned sigh, Maddie turned back towards the dining area. Her eyes immediately went to the booth she had originally occupied, only to find it now taken by a couple in crisp business suits. They were engaged in quiet conversation, seemingly oblivious to the drama that had unfolded there just minutes ago. The pointed nature of this seating arrangement wasn't lost on Maddie. Whittaker had deliberately given away her table. It was another calculated move, another way to demonstrate just how unwelcome she was in his establishment. Maddie's gaze swept the room, looking for a safe haven. She spotted an empty booth in the far corner, as distant from her original spot as possible. Moving carefully to avoid drawing attention, she made her way across the cafe floor. As she slid into the booth, a shiver ran through her body. Her damp clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin, and she realized with dismay that she was seated directly under an air conditioning vent. The cold air blowing down on her made her teeth chatter. Maddie huddled in on herself, trying to conserve what little body heat she had left. She debated her next move. Part of her wanted nothing more than to leave this place and never return, but the worsening weather outside and her still precarious medical state made that a risky proposition. Her eyes landed on a table nearby, where a man had just taken a seat. For a brief moment, Maddie considered asking to switch places with him, to escape the direct blast of the AC, but the memory of Whittaker's hostility made her hesitate. Withdrawing any attention to herself only invite more confrontation. After a moment's deliberation, Maddie made a decision. She would stay put, but try to improve her situation as best she could. Summoning her courage, she caught the eye of a passing waitress, not the young woman from earlier, but an older server with a kind face. "Excuse me," Maddie called softly, her voice trembling slightly. The waitress approached, a wary look in her eyes. Clearly, word of the earlier incident had spread among the staff. "Yes, ma'am," the waitress asked, her tone cautious but not unkind. Maddie mustered a smile, trying to project calm despite her inner turmoil. "I'm sorry to trouble you, but I was wondering if it might be possible to adjust the air conditioning. It's blowing directly on me, and with my clothes being damp, I'm feeling quite chilled." The waitress's expression softened slightly. "Maddie, I'll see what I can do about redirecting the vent, ma'am. Would you like me to bring you some hot water to help warm you up?" Relief washed over Maddie. "That would be wonderful, thank you." As the waitress turned to leave, a familiar and unwelcome voice cut through the air. "Is there a problem here?" Maddie's heart sank as she looked up to see James Whittaker approaching, his face set in a mask of barely contained anger. The waitress visibly tensed, stepping back as the manager inserted himself into the situation. "No problem at all," Maddie replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I was just asking if the air conditioning could be adjusted slightly." Whittaker's eyes narrowed. "The temperature in my establishment is set for the comfort of our paying customers. If you're cold, perhaps that's a sign you should move along." Maddie felt a flicker of anger ignite within her. She had tried to be accommodating, to avoid conflict, but enough was enough. "Mr. Whittaker," she began, her voice low but firm, "I understand this is your cafe, but I am a paying customer, just like anyone else here. I have as much right to be comfortable as anyone else." Whittaker's face flushed red. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen here, you old bat. I own this place. That means I decide who's welcome and who isn't. And let me make this crystal clear. You are not welcome. Your money only God knows where they come from might as well bloody." As he spoke, Whittaker's body language became increasingly aggressive. He loomed over Maddie, his presence threatening. Maddie found herself shrinking back in her seat, her earlier bravado faltering in the face of such open hostility. The confrontation was drawing attention now. Other patrons were turning to watch, their expressions a mix of confusion and discomfort. The waitress hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Maddie's mind raced, searching for a way to defuse the situation. But before she could speak, Whittaker's next actions would escalate things beyond anything she could have anticipated. The tension in the air was palpable as Whittaker glared down at Maddie, his face contorted with barely contained rage. For a moment, the cafe seemed frozen in a tableau of hostility and fear. Then, with a sharp snap of his fingers, Whittaker shattered the tension in the air. "You two," he barked, gesturing at a pair of burly servers nearby. "Escort this woman out immediately." As murmurs began to ripple through the other tables, Whittaker quickly concocted an excuse, his tone dripping with feigned disgust. "She just wet herself, everyone," he announced loudly, his words eliciting gasps and uncomfortable glances from the onlookers. The lie hung in the air, cruel and deliberate, as Whittaker cast a cold, triumphant glance in her direction. The servers exchanged uneasy glances, but moved to comply. They approached Maddie's booth, their discomfort evident in their hesitant movements. "Please, ma'am," one of them said, his voice low. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Maddie's heart raced as she looked from one server to the other, then back to Whittaker's smug face. "This isn't right," she protested, her voice shaking. "I've done nothing wrong." But her words fell on deaf ears. With a nod from Whittaker, the servers reached for Maddie's arms. Their grip, while not overtly rough, was firm and unyielding. As they attempted to pull her from the booth, Maddie's foot caught on the table leg. Time seemed to slow as Maddie felt herself losing balance. She flailed, trying to catch herself, but the momentum was too great. With a cry of alarm, she tumbled forward, landing hard on the cafe's polished floor. The impact knocked the wind out of her. As Maddie lay there, struggling to catch her breath, she heard a clatter. Her purse had spilled open in the fall, and her pill bottle skittered across the tiles, spilling its ruined contents. A hush fell over the cafe. Patrons stared in shocked silence at the elderly woman sprawled on the floor, surrounded by the scattered remnants of her medication. The only sounds were Maddie's labored breathing and the soft plink of pills rolling across the smooth floor. Maddie closed her eyes, fighting back tears of pain and humiliation. In all her years, through all the hardships and indignities she'd faced, she'd never felt so utterly helpless and exposed. The servers stood frozen, clearly shocked by the outcome of their actions. Even Whittaker seemed taken aback, though his expression quickly hardened back into one of disdain. "Well," Whittaker snapped at the servers, "don't just stand there, get her out of here." But before anyone could move, a new voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "That's quite enough." Heads turned towards the source of the interruption. There, striding purposefully from the back of the cafe, was a face known to millions, Johnny Depp. The actor's presence created an immediate shift in the room's energy. Patrons whispered and pointed. Phones appeared in hands as people tried to discreetly capture the moment. But Depp paid no attention to the stir he was causing. His focus was entirely on the scene before him. As he approached, Depp's eyes met Maddie's. There was a gentleness in his gaze, a stark contrast to the hostility she'd faced from Whittaker. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her, offering a hand. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice low and kind. Maddie nodded, unable to find her voice. With Depp's assistance, she slowly got to her feet, wincing at the aches from her fall. Whittaker, momentarily thrown by the unexpected celebrity appearance, quickly recovered his bravado. "Mr. Depp," he said, his tone dripping with false politeness, "I'm afraid you've wandered into a rather unpleasant situation. This woman was just leaving." Depp turned to face Whittaker, his expression hardening. "The only unpleasant thing I see here is your treatment of this lady. Would you care to explain why you felt it necessary to physically remove an elderly woman from your establishment?" Whittaker's face flushed. "This is my cafe. I have the right to refuse service to anyone." "Refuse service, perhaps," Depp replied coolly. "But assault, discrimination, I think you'll find the law takes a rather dim view of such actions." As Whittaker sputtered, trying to formulate a response, Depp turned back to Maddie. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you out of here and find something warm for you." With that, Depp guided Maddie towards the exit, his presence creating a natural path through the now buzzing crowd of onlookers. As they reached the door, Depp paused, looking back at Whittaker. "I'd suggest you take a long, hard look at how you run this place," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed cafe, "because I have a feeling you're going to be answering some difficult questions very soon." And with that, Johnny Depp and Maddie stepped out into the rainy New York afternoon, leaving behind a stunned cafe and a fuming James Whittaker. The cool, misty air hit Maddie's face as she and Johnny Depp exited the cafe. The earlier threatening storm had settled into a light, steady rain, but even this felt refreshing after the stifling atmosphere inside. "Wait here a moment," Depp said gently, guiding Maddie to a sheltered spot under the building's overhang. He jogged quickly to a small kiosk next door, returning moments later with a steaming cup. "It's just some hot tea," he explained, pressing the warm cup into Maddie's trembling hands. "It should help take the chill off." Maddie nodded gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the cup and savoring its warmth. As she sipped the soothing liquid, Depp's expression turned thoughtful. "What happened in there?" "It wasn't right," he said, his voice low and intense. "People need to know about this kind of behavior. Would you be okay if I tried to do something about it?" Maddie looked up at him, a mix of emotions playing across her face. After a moment, she nodded. Maddie nodded. If it might prevent someone else from going through this, then yes. Depp's face set with determination. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then held it up. Maddie realized he was starting a live stream on his social media, carefully positioning himself so the cafe's name was visible in the background. "Hey everyone," Depp began, his voice clear and controlled. "I'm coming to you live from outside of Whittaker's Cafe in New York City, where I've just witnessed something truly disturbing. The owner of this establishment, a man named James Whittaker, has just engaged in blatant discrimination and physical assault against an elderly woman." As Depp continued, detailing the events that had transpired inside, Maddie watched in amazement as the world seemed to respond in real time. People on the street began to slow and gather, recognizing the actor and realizing something significant was happening. Phones appeared in hands, capturing the moment and spreading it further. Within minutes, the first fans began to arrive, drawn by social media alerts and the growing crowd. They clustered around, phones raised, adding their own streams and commentary to the unfolding story. Depp, to his credit, kept the focus on the issue at hand. He described Whittaker's actions in detail, emphasizing the need for accountability and change. As he spoke, Maddie noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. A van with a local entertainment news station's logo had pulled up, and a small crew was quickly setting up equipment. The crowd continued to grow, spreading across the sidewalk and beginning to spill into the street. Traffic slowed as drivers craned their necks to see what was causing the commotion. More media vans appeared, their presence drawing even more attention. Just as the situation threatened to become overwhelming, a sleek black car pulled up, and two men in suits emerged. They moved with purpose, creating a protective barrier around Depp and Maddie. "Mr. Depp," one of them said quietly, "we should move you to a more secure location." Depp nodded, then turned to Maddie. "My security team," he explained. "They'll make sure we're safe. Are you ready to go?" Maddie glanced back at the cafe, where she could see Whittaker's pale face peering out from behind the blinds. She squared her shoulders and nodded. "Yes, I think I am." The security team efficiently guided them through the crowd to the waiting car. As the chauffeur held the door open, shielding Maddie from the press of bodies and flashing cameras, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time since entering the cafe, she felt truly safe. Once inside the luxury vehicle, Maddie sank into the plush leather seat with a sigh. Through the tinted windows, she watched as reporters set up cameras and microphones outside the cafe. The scene was surreal, all this commotion sparked by what had begun as a simple stop for hot water and a snack. Depp settled in beside her, his face serious. "The media coverage will make sure Whittaker can't sweep this under the rug," he explained. "It won't undo what happened to you, but it might prevent him from treating others the same way in the future." Maddie nodded, a mix of emotions swirling within her. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos behind, she found herself wondering about the man beside her. This unexpected champion who had stepped into her life at just the right moment. As the luxury car glided through the rain-slick streets of New York, a comfortable silence settled between Maddie and Johnny Depp. The chaos of the cafe scene faded into the background, replaced by the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. After a few moments, Maddie turned to Depp, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "Mr. Depp," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I can't thank you enough for what you did back there. But why? Why did you care so much about helping someone like me?" Depp's expression softened, a hint of sadness touching his eyes. "Someone like you," he repeated gently. "You mean someone deserving of respect and basic human decency? I'd hope anyone would step in to help." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "But if you're asking why it resonated with me personally, well, that goes back a ways." Depp shifted in his seat, angling himself towards Maddie. "My mother, Betty Sue Palmer, she worked as a waitress for most of her life. We didn't have much when I was growing up, and I saw firsthand the kind of prejudice and hardship she faced." His voice took on a warm, reverent tone as he spoke of his mother. "She was the strongest person I've ever known. No matter how tough things got, she never lost her dignity, but I saw how much it hurt her when people looked down on her, or treated her as less than because of her job or our economic situation." Maddie nodded, a look of understanding crossing her face. "It leaves marks that don't show on the outside," she said softly. "Exactly," Depp agreed. "And you know in my line of work I've been on both sides of that coin. I've experienced the adulation that comes with fame, but I've also felt the sting of public judgment and misunderstanding. It's given me a deep appreciation for those who face prejudice and mistreatment every day." He leaned back, his gaze distant for a moment. "A lot of the roles I choose, they're often characters who are overlooked or misunderstood by society. I guess in a way, it's my attempt to give voice to those who might not otherwise be heard." Maddie listened intently, seeing the actor in a new light. As Depp spoke, she found herself reaching into her purse, her fingers closing around the damp pill bottle. She hesitated for a moment before pulling it out. "Mr. Depp," she said, her voice catching slightly, "this is what started all the trouble in the cafe." She held out the bottle, its label smeared and peeling. "I have a condition called Addison's disease. These pills, they're not just medication, they're my lifeline." Depp's expression turned serious as he examined the bottle. "I've heard of Addison's disease, but I don't know much about it. Can you tell me more?" Maddie nodded, launching into an explanation she'd given many times before, but never under such surreal circumstances. "It's an adrenal insufficiency. My body doesn't produce certain essential hormones, so I have to take medication to replace them. The timing is crucial. Missing a dose can lead to a crisis, which can be life-threatening." She sighed, looking at the ruined pills. "And they're expensive. I budget carefully each month to afford them. When that man dumped water on me, he didn't just ruin my clothes. He put my health at risk and wasted money I can't easily replace." Depp listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. Without hesitation, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. "Mrs. Parker," he said, using her name for the first time, "I'd like to help if you'll let me." Maddie watched a mix of emotions playing across her face as Depp wrote out a check. When he handed it to her, her eyes widened at the amount. Mr. Depp, this is far too much. I couldn't possibly. Depp held up a hand, smiling gently. Please, I insist, use what you need for your medication, and if there's anything left over, consider it a buffer for future expenses, or maybe a little treat for yourself. After what you've been through today, you deserve it. Maddie accepted the check with trembling hands, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what else to say. Depp's voice, smooth and tinged with a hint of playful charm, softened as he addressed the elderly woman. Now then, my dear, where shall I whisk you away to? Your doctor, perhaps? Could be to sort out that medication of yours, or straight home to your apartment, The woman gave a gentle smile, her voice warm with gratitude. Home at my apartment would be nice. Johnny nodded with a slight tilt of his head, his expression a mix of care and theatrical flourish. Home it is then. Your chariot awaits, madam. The sleek black car pulled up to a weathered apartment building, its faded brick facade a stark contrast to the luxury vehicle. Maddie gazed out the window, a mix of relief and embarrassment washing over her. This was her home, a far cry from the glamorous world Johnny Depp usually inhabited. This is me, she said softly, her hand resting on the door handle. Depp looked at the building with interest, his eyes taking in the peeling paint and cracked concrete steps. You know, he said thoughtfully, there's a lot of character in old buildings like this. They've got stories to tell. Maddie smiled, touched by his attempt to put her at ease. Oh, if these walls could talk, she chuckled, they'd have quite a few tales. As they prepared to exit the car, movement near the building's entrance caught their attention. A lanky teenager paced back and forth, occasionally checking his phone with growing frustration. Oh my, Maddie said, recognition dawning. That's my grandson, Michael. I completely forgot he was coming by today to help with groceries. They watched as Michael tried the door again, then exasperation. Depp grinned. Looks like someone's not too happy about being locked out. As they stepped out of the car, Michael looked up, his expression transformed from annoyance to utter disbelief as he recognized the man accompanying his grandmother. Gran! He called out, his voice cracking slightly. Is that you with Johnny Depp? Depp raised a hand in a friendly wave, causing Michael's jaw to drop even further. Maddie couldn't help but chuckle at her grandson's reaction. Hello, Michael, she called back. I'm sorry I'm late. It's been quite an afternoon. As they approached, Michael's eyes darted between his grandmother and the Hollywood star, clearly struggling to process the surreal scene. Gran, what happened? Are you okay? Why has Maddie patted her grandson's arm reassuringly? It's a long story, dear. Why don't we go inside and I'll explain everything. As she fumbled for her keys, Maddie was acutely aware of the check tucked safely in her purse. She'd carefully concealed it in the folds of her dress before exiting the car, understanding instinctively that its presence might complicate the moment. Michael, meanwhile, couldn't contain his excitement. Mr. Depp, sir, I'm a huge fan. I've seen all your movies, Pirates of the Caribbean, Edward Scissorhands, Sweeney Todd. They're amazing. Depp smiled warmly. Thank you, Michael. It's always nice to meet a fan. Your grandmother is quite an impressive lady, you know. Michael nodded enthusiastically. Oh, I know. Gran's the best. But how did you two meet? Did she win some contest or something? Maddie, having finally managed to open the door, turned to her grandson. Michael, dear, why don't you help me inside? Mr. Depp needs to be on his way, I'm sure. Depp nodded, understanding Maddie's desire for privacy. It was a pleasure meeting you both, he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a business card, handing it to Maddie. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. As Depp turned to leave, Michael called out, Wait, did any money change hands? Because if it did, I think we should talk about how to invest it, or Michael. Maddie cut him off sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned back to Depp, offering a grateful smile. Thank you again for everything, Mr. Departamento. You've been far too kind. With a final wave, Johnny Depp returned to his waiting car, leaving Maddie to guide her still-stunned grandson into the building. As they made their way up the worn stairs, Maddie couldn't help but reflect on the day's events. The cruelty she had faced, the unexpected kindness from a stranger, and now the challenge of explaining it all to her grandson without revealing the extent of Depp's generosity. She clutched her purse a little tighter, feeling the weight of the check inside. It was a secret she would keep, at least for now. Some kindnesses, she knew, were best kept close to the heart. The door to Maddie's apartment creaked open, revealing a modest but tidy living space. Faded floral wallpaper and well-worn furniture spoke of a life lived with care, if not luxury. As Maddie settled into her favorite armchair, Michael perched on the edge of the sofa, practically vibrating with curiosity. "Okay, Gran," he burst out, unable to contain himself any longer. "You've got to tell me everything. How did you end up with Johnny Depp? Did he give you any money?" "Because if he did, we could really use that to Michael," Maddie interrupted, her voice firm but gentle. "Before we discuss anything else, I think we need to have a conversation about values and integrity." Michael's excitement deflated slightly, recognizing his grandmother's teaching moment tone. "What do you mean, Gran?" Maddie leaned forward, her eyes locked on her grandson's. "Michael, when something unexpected happens in life, our first thought shouldn't be about how we can profit from it. That kind of thinking, it's a slippery slope." She paused, gathering her thoughts. What happened today was the result of a very unpleasant situation. Mr. Depp showed kindness to a stranger in need. That's not something to be exploited. Michael looked down, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Gran. I didn't mean to sound greedy. It's just, I know things have been tight, and I thought maybe this could help." Maddie's expression softened. "I understand, dear, but lasting success doesn't come from looking for shortcuts or handouts. It comes from hard work, integrity, and treating others with respect." She reached out, patting Michael's hand. Mr. Depp didn't become successful by taking advantage of others. He worked hard, honed his craft, and from what I saw today, he never forgot the importance of kindness. Michael nodded slowly, absorbing his grandmother's words. "You're right, Gran. I guess I got carried away with the excitement of it all." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. After a moment, Michael spoke up again, his tone more subdued. "So, what did happen today? How did you end up meeting Johnny Depp?" Maddie sighed, preparing to recount the day's events, but before she could begin, the TV in the corner, which Michael had absently switched on when they entered, caught their attention. "Breaking news," the anchor announced. Hollywood star Johnny Depp has publicly called out a New York City cafe owner for alleged discrimination and assault against an elderly patron. Michael's eyes widened as footage from Depp's impromptu press conference outside the cafe played on screen. The camera panned to show James Whittaker looking decidedly uncomfortable as he faced a barrage of questions from reporters. "Want to apologize," Whittaker stammered, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "To Miss Parker and to Mr. Depp, my actions were inexcusable, and I am prepared to face the consequences." As the news segment continued, detailing the incident and the swift public backlash against the cafe, Michael turned to his grandmother in awe. "Gran, that was you. You're the one he helped." Maddie nodded, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Yes, dear, it wasn't how I expected my afternoon to go, that's for certain." Michael listened intently as Maddie recounted the events at the cafe, his expression shifting from shock to anger to admiration as the story unfolded. When she finished, he shook his head in disbelief. "Gran, you're amazing," he said softly. "After all that, you're still so calm." "I don't know if I could have handled it that way." Maddie smiled, reaching out to squeeze her grandson's hand. "Life gives us many teachers, Michael. Sometimes they come in the form of cruel cafe owners, and sometimes they're unexpected Hollywood stars. The important thing is to learn from each experience and to always strive to be the best version of yourself." As the afternoon wore on, their conversation drifted to more practical matters. Michael helped Maddie sort through her medications, making note of what needed to be replaced. "Michael," Maddie said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, I'm going to need to see the doctor to get a new prescription for my medication. Would you be able to help me make an appointment and come with me? Michael nodded immediately. Of course, Gran. When do you want to go? Maddie sighed, rubbing her temples. As soon as possible, really. In a few hours or this evening. After today's incident, I'm running dangerously low on my medication. Could you call the hospital right now and see if they can fit me in today? Absolutely, Michael replied, pulling out his phone to check the doctor's schedule on the hospital's website. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, his brow furrowed in focus. Thank you, dear, the elderly woman said with a tired smile. I'll go rest inside for now. It's been such a long day. Her voice trailed off, heavy with weariness, as she turned to head inside. Wait, Gran, Michael called, and Maddie paused at the door. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he asked, Next time I come over, do you think I could bring my Pirates of the Caribbean hat? You know, just in case Johnny Depp stops by again. Maddie chuckled, shaking her head fondly. Oh, Michael, I think it's safe to say that was a once-in-a-lifetime encounter. Maybe, Michael grinned, but you never know, right? Maddie gestured toward his bedroom, and as the door clicked shut behind her grandson, she made her way inside. With deliberate care, she retrieved the check from its hidden spot, holding it in her hands for a long moment, contemplating its significance. After a deep breath, she tucked it securely into her dresser drawer and locked it. Tomorrow, she'd head to the bank to deposit it, ensuring a safety net for her growing medical expenses. But for now, as she prepared for bed, Maddie found herself reflecting on the day's events. The cruelty she'd faced, the unexpected kindness, and the valuable lessons she'd been able to impart to her grandson. It all swirled together in her mind. As she drifted off to sleep, Maddie felt a sense of peace settle over her. Life, she knew, would always have its challenges, but it also had a way of surprising you with moments of grace and humanity when you least expected them, and sometimes those moments could change everything. With the promise of a new prescription and her grandson's support, Maddie closed her eyes, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring.